Hey folks, this is Cindy. Thanks so much for joining me. In today's video, we're going to be talking about Copic and Colored Pencil coloring on the Power Poppy Gladioli digital stamp. I have this printed out on Expressive blending card. It is 175% of the default size. I wanted to make this nice and big and bold to really play up and make a really big impact with this image. Now, if you take a look at this illustration, you can see that there is a lot going on with these flower petals. Gladiolis have quite a bit of bends and folds and movement within their petals. That's part of the charm of a gladioli. However, we're going to simplify this quite a bit in how we approach our coloring, and I'm actually going to start with my leaves here. These are a fairly simple portion of this image, and I'm going to take this one stock at a time here. I'm going to start with the G29. I'm going to go in where I need my darkest shade areas to be, and then I'm going to come in with a G46, go right over the top of that G29. I'm going to leave just a sliver on that portion of the leaf there to finish off with my G24. Move up here to this leaf, and I'm just coming in straight up with this G46. I don't need a whole bunch of darkness and shade in that leaf. It's pretty close to our light source here, so we can leave it a little bit on the lighter side without having to go directly in with that G29. Now I'm coming in with that G24, going over the top of my first two colors and just finishing that out. I'm going to do the same thing with all of these leaves. Now, sometimes when I start a project, I start with my lightest colors, especially with flowers. If I need to gauge how dark I want them to go, I'll start with them first because I don't have any other color reference going on in the rest of the image just yet. So that really helps give me a benchmark on how dark I want to go. In this case, I know I'm going to have some dark red flowers and they're a little bit more complicated. I need to start making sense of what's going on here. So I'm going to start with the easiest thing first, and that's these leaves, and get these knocked out of there so I can focus a little bit better on the rest of my coloring, especially with those flowers. So all three of these stalks are going to be the same thing. You're going in where those darkest shaded areas need to go with your G29, and I'm being super mindful on where I'm placing that since it is my darkest. If I know that I have a point in my image that is going to come out closest to the light and be finished off with the G24, then I know right next to it, it's going to probably have a darker shaded area that is going to be a little bit lighter. There's a really good example where that flower was hanging over that stalk. I added that G29 there, but the leaf next to it had the G24. So it gives me some of that visual separation that I'm looking for in order to make these look like they're three-dimensional. Now here I have that G29 that goes down the edge of that stem right next to the leaf there on the bottom that has that G24. So that G24 stands out closer to our eye. That G29 goes further back away from our eye, and that is perfect. That's exactly what I'm trying to accomplish. At all times, I'm going in with the G46 right over the top of that G29 to help blend my G24 and my G29 together. They can be a little tricky there, folks. So that G46 is a really nice transition color between the two of them. When I actually chose the colors for the leaves on this project, I was actually looking for more sagey green, and typically that's what gladioli leaves are, especially in the red variety. That G24 was perfect, and I knew that it would work well with the pale sage colored pencil that I was going to want to use. So I started with the G24. I know G29 will work with the G24, but I needed that transition between the 29 and the 24, and the G46 got me there. At all times, my primary focus is getting that sagey color at the end here. So I'm trying to keep these a little bit on the lighter side. Plus, I do not want them to compete with my flowers. The flowers are the hero in my image, while the leaves are an important part of this illustration overall. The one thing that I want to stand out the most are going to be these gladiolas. So if I go too dark and too heavy on these leaves, it's going to start start all blending in together by the time I get done coloring in my red flowers. So I have to keep that in mind as I go. Plus, I'm also thinking about that target shade I want, and I really want that pale sage. Now, there is something else that I'm going to be doing to these leaves to help finish them off, but we'll talk about that more when we get there. Now that all of my leaves are done, I'm going to start on my flowers here. I'm starting with the Copic and R29. I'm going to be using this for my darkest shade color. And while I do want to focus on any area that I want to push back the darkest, like the center of this flower right here where this is coming up out from between these leaves, that's going to have a little bit of shade there where I need to separate these petals. I need to make sure that I'm adding that R29 in there. I'm not going to hyper focus on the bends and the folds and the movement at the tips of those petals. There's no reason to overcomplicate this. Now, as I said, part of a Gladioli's charm is all of that texture and movement, that natural movement in them. However, instead of stressing myself out on trying to get that color in there with the very fat tip of my Copic marker, I'm just going to take it out of there altogether. I can add more of that detail back in there with my colored pencils. When I'm done with the R29, I come in with the R27, and then I'm going to finish this off entirely with the R24. Just go over the top of both of my colors on these ones that are open, and you can see the stamen in them. I am trying to make an effort to make sure that I don't color on the inside of those. I do get some color on the inside of this one, but that's okay. I'm going to come in with my colorless blender, push that out, and then I'll finish that up later with my Staedtler pens and my colored pencils. Now, if you are enjoying this project and you want to see the full step-by-step video, do be sure to join us over on Patreon. Your membership gets you early access to all of my projects, including this one. Plus, you'll get instant access to my complete Patreon video library. You can find a link to that and the card in the top right hand side of our screen. Now I am ready to start working with my colored pencils. Now I start this out with a Prismacolor in a dark purple, and I'm going to finish the majority of this one with the dark purple. However, I do get to the point where I start to realize that I'm not going quite as dark as I absolutely need to go. So I do end up bringing in a black grape and completely dropping the dark purple. However, if that black grape seems very intimidating to you, then by all means use that dark purple. I just liked how much further I could go with the black grape. Now here is where I'm going to add those little details. You can see those bends and folds at the tips of those petals. I'm going to add that shading in here with my colored pencils because this is a dry medium. I can sharpen it. I have more control over it. I can get into those finer spots without making a huge mess. And also because I'm going in with a very sharp pencil and a very light hand, if I make a mistake, I do have the opportunity to lightly erase it, lift up some of that color and try again, or I can just skip it all together and move on, and then I'm good to go. This is a really great way to take something that is a little bit more on the complex side and make it a little bit easier for yourself. It kind of alleviates some of the stress, and it definitely alleviates that voice in the back of your head that says that I can't color in an image like this, because you can. You just have to be able to accept that you're going to have to take a different approach between your wet mediums and your dry mediums, but it is absolutely doable. Okay, so here is where I'm using that black grape instead of the dark purple, and you can definitely see a difference between the two of those. I'm instantly getting that darker shade in there that I wanted from the beginning. This definitely makes these flowers stand out that much more, gives them a lot more dimension all by themselves. After I'm done with that black grape, I'm bringing in a crimson red, and I'm going right over the top of that black grape and bringing this out. And this would be any area that I would have had that R27. Again, a very sharp pencil, super duper light hand. I can continue to build up this color as I go. I don't need to overdo it. I am also going to bring in the Prismacolor in blush pink and just add it to any place I would want a very sharp highlight. Now, typically folks would break out a white color colored pencil, but you don't need to do that. You can still accomplish the same thing with a colored pencil. It doesn't always need to be white. Regardless, over a few days, those colors are going to marinate and they're going to kind of knock back a little bit. They won't seem so stark, and we don't need any hot highlights on these flowers because they wouldn't have them anyways. So that blush pink is perfect for that. Now I'm getting started on my leaves here. I'm going to come in with the indigo blue, go in where I had that G29. When I'm done with that, I'm going to bring in the Prussian green. I'm going right over the top of the indigo blue and bringing that out a little bit. This would be about in the areas that I had any of that G46. And also going to make that indigo blue look like a more desaturated green instead of just a blue. Now to finish these off, this is a really great, easy detail you can add. I have the Prismacolor in Scarlet Lake. I'm going over the top of the indigo blue and the Prussian green just in those areas and building up that color to the point where I see red. Now I'm making sure that I keep my hand super light because I don't want to make mud. I just want to be able to see that red through it. So I'm going to work at these and go back and forth until I get that red just built up to the point where I can see it and it stands out well enough that it's not overpowering the entire image. And there you have it, folks, a few tips and tricks in Copic and Colored Pencil coloring the Power Poppy Gladioli digital stamp. We are done. We are good to go. I have links for all of the products I used today down in the description below, as well as over on my blog. I hope you enjoyed my project today. If you did, hit that like button and be sure to share it with your friends. Also, be sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and tap that bell next to the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of my future videos. Thanks again so much for joining me. Until next time.